I was 13 when my cousin's fist split my lip open, and my dad just stood there watching, his arms crossed like I deserved it. Blood dripped onto my shirt, and I remember the sting of tears mixing with the coppery taste in my mouth. My cousin Jake was 16, bigger, meaner, and he'd been tormenting me for years, shoving me into walls, locking me in the basement, whispering threats when no one was around. But that day in our living room, with the sun streaming through the curtains, he didn't hold back. He called me worthless, a burden, and when I talked back, his punch came fast. I hit the floor, dazed, waiting for my dad to step in. He didn't. Instead, he said, "You shouldn't have provoked him, Sarah." That moment broke something in me. If you appreciate what I do here, please like the video and subscribe. It means a lot and helps me keep sharing these stories. I grew up in a small Ohio town, in a house where family was everything, until it wasn't. My dad, a quiet man who worked long hours at the factory, always preached loyalty. Jake was my uncle's son, practically raised with us after his mom left. He was family, sure, but he was a bully, and everyone knew it. My dad, though, saw him as the son he never had. Jake could do no wrong, star athlete, charming when he wanted to be. Me? I was the shy, awkward daughter who couldn't measure up. That day wasn't the first time Jake hurt me, but it was the first time I realized my dad wouldn't protect me. He'd always make excuses. Boys are rough, or you're too sensitive. But this was different. This was betrayal, raw and ugly, staring me in the face as I wiped blood from my chin. I remember crawling to my room, locking the door and crying into my pillow, wondering why my own father chose Jake over me. The house felt smaller after that, like the walls were closing in. Every family dinner, every holiday, Jake was there, smirking, knowing he could get away with anything. My dad would laugh off his roughhousing, even when it left bruises on my arms. My mom, tired and checked out, just told me to stay out of Jake's way. I tried. God, I tried. I'd hide in my room, avoid him at school, but he'd find me taunting, pushing, once even spitting in my food when no one was looking. I started to believe I was nothing, just like he said. School wasn't much better. Jake was popular, and his lies about me spread like wildfire. Kids called me crazy or dramatic, and I had no one to turn to. My dad's words echoed in my head. "You provoked him." I started to wonder if it was true. Was I the problem? Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake, hearing Jake's voice through the walls, joking with my dad like nothing happened. I felt invisible, like I didn't matter in my own home. School wasn't much better. Jake was popular, and his lies about me spread like wildfire. Kids called me crazy or dramatic, and I had no one to turn to. My dad's words echoed in my head. "You provoked him." I started to wonder if it was true. Was I the problem? Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake, hearing Jake's voice through the walls, joking with my dad like nothing happened. I felt invisible, like I didn't matter in my own home. Jake moved out for college, but the damage was done. My dad never apologized, never acknowledged the years of pain. He'd still talk about Jake like he was perfect, showing off his football trophies to neighbors. I felt like a ghost in my own life, carrying a wound no one else could see. But something shifted in me that year. I was tired of being small, tired of believing I was nothing. I started reading books about strength, about surviving trauma. I found a teacher, Mrs. Ellis, who saw my quiet pain and encouraged me to write more, to speak up. She'd say, "Your voice matters, Sarah." It was the first time someone believed in me. I clung to that like a lifeline. I didn't know it then, but that was the start of taking my life back. I wasn't plotting revenge, not yet. I just wanted to understand why my dad let me suffer, why he chose Jake. I started paying attention, noticing how Jake manipulated everyone, how my dad's pride in him was built on lies. It wasn't enough to just survive anymore. I wanted to be seen, to be heard, to prove I wasn't the problem. That's when I realized the truth could be my weapon, not to destroy, but to rebuild. The summer I turned 17, I found one of my old journals under my bed, pages crinkled and stained with tears, each entry a scream I never let out. Reading it felt like reliving every moment. Jake hurt me, his sneers, his fists, the way he'd pin me against the wall when no one was home, whispering, "You're nothing, Sarah, and no one cares." My dad's voice was there too, sharp in my memory. "Stop making trouble." I'd sit on my floor, hugging my knees, wondering how my own father could look at my bruises and blame me. The pain wasn't just physical. It was the kind that sank into your bones, making you question if you deserved to exist. Jake was gone, off at college, but his shadow hung over me. I'd see his name on my dad's phone, hear my dad brag about his grades, his games, while I was just there, invisible. My mom barely noticed, lost in her own world of work and exhaustion. I felt like I was drowning in their silence. At school, I was alone too. Jake's lies had turned old friends against me. I'd walk through the halls, head down, hearing whispers. She's so weird, or she's lying about Jake. I stopped trying to explain. What was the point? No one believed me. Nights were endless. I'd stare at the ceiling, replaying every cruel moment. Jake shoving me down the stairs, laughing as I limped away. My dad's cold stare when I begged him to make it stop. I started having nightmares, waking up gasping, my heart racing like Jake was in the room. I was so angry, not just at him but at myself for believing I was worthless. I'd look in the mirror and hate the scared girl staring back. But something was shifting. Mrs. Ellis, my English teacher, kept pushing me to write. She'd read my essays, my poems, and say, "You've got a gift, Sarah. Don't let anyone take it away." Her words were like a crack of light in the dark. I started writing more, not just about the pain, but about who I wanted to be. I'd imagine a version of me who wasn't afraid, who could stand up to Jake, to my dad, to the world. I got a part-time job at a bookstore, saving every penny, dreaming of a life far from that house. But the hurt didn't just vanish. Some days I'd hear my dad laugh with Jake on the phone, and it was like a knife twisting in my chest. Why was I never enough? I'd cry in the shower, letting the water drown out my sobs, asking God or whoever was listening why my own family didn't love me. I started noticing things, though. Jake's charm wasn't flawless. He'd slip up, brag about cheating on tests, or lie about his football stats. My dad ate it up, but I saw the cracks. I kept writing it all down, every detail, every lie. My journal became my armor, proof that I wasn't crazy. I'd read about people who'd survived worse, who'd turned pain into strength. I wanted that. I started running, just to feel my body move, to prove I was still here. Each step felt like defiance, like I was claiming a piece of myself back. I wasn't strong yet, but I was starting to believe I could be. Mrs. Ellis got me into a writing club, and for the first time I had people who listened, who didn't know Jake or his lies. They'd nod when I read my poems, not about the abuse. I wasn't ready to share that, but about feeling lost, about fighting to be seen. One girl, Mia, became my first real friend. She'd hug me when I got quiet, like she knew I was carrying something heavy. I never told her about Jake, but her kindness made me feel less alone. I started thinking about college, about leaving Ohio, leaving my dad's betrayal behind. But the anger was still there, simmering. I didn't want to just run away. I wanted Jake to face what he'd done, wanted my dad to see the truth. Not to hurt them, not really, but to make them feel the weight of their choices. I started looking up Jake's life online, his social media, his college stats. He wasn't the golden boy everyone thought. I found posts where he bragged about fights, about skipping classes. I saved screenshots. Not sure why, but it felt important. It was like gathering evidence for a trial no one else knew was coming. I wasn't ready to act, but I was done being silent. I wanted my voice to matter, to cut through the lies. I just didn't know how yet. By the time I was 20, I was out of that house, living in a tiny apartment near my college in Michigan, paid for with scholarships and my bookstore job. Freedom tasted like cheap coffee and late-night study sessions, but the scars Jake left, both the ones on my skin and the ones in my heart, still ached. I'd built a new life, with friends like Mia who didn't know the old, broken Sarah. But every call from my dad, every mention of Jake's success, brought the pain rushing back. Jake was a senior now, still the golden boy, posting about his football wins and his perfect life online. My dad would send me clippings of Jake's games, never asking about my classes or my writing. It hurt, but I wasn't that scared girl anymore. I'd spent years writing in my journals, piecing together every cruel thing Jake did, every punch, every threat, every time he made me feel like nothing. I had pages of it and screenshots of his lies online, boasting about fights, cheating, even a drunk driving incident he laughed off. I wasn't sure what to do with it all, but I knew I couldn't stay silent forever. Then came the moment that changed everything. My dad called, asking me to come home for a family reunion. Jake would be there, he said, like it was a selling point. I felt that old fear creep in, but then anger, hot, steady anger. I said yes, not because I wanted to see them, but because I was done running. I packed my journals, my evidence, and drove back to Ohio. The reunion was at my uncle's house, packed with relatives who'd never noticed my pain. Jake walked in, all smiles, shaking hands like a politician. My dad clapped him on the back, proud as ever. I felt sick, but I stayed calm. That night after dinner, they started toasting Jake's bright future. I stood up, my hands shaking, and asked to speak. I didn't yell or cry. I just started talking, my voice steady, about what Jake had done to me. The room went quiet as I described the punches, the bruises, the years of torment. I read from my journal, page after page, my truth filling the silence. I showed the screenshots, Jake's own words bragging about his cruelty. My dad's face went pale. My uncle tried to interrupt, but I kept going, naming every time my dad blamed me, every time he chose Jake over his own daughter. I wasn't cruel. I didn't accuse or point fingers wildly. I just laid out the truth, plain and raw. Some aunts and cousins looked away, ashamed. Others whispered, shocked. Jake tried to laugh it off, calling me a liar, but his voice cracked, and I saw fear in his eyes. My dad didn't say a word. When I finished, I walked out, leaving my journals on the table for anyone to read. The next day, word spread. Family members called Jake out online, sharing my story. His college coach saw the posts, and Jake lost his scholarship. He wasn't expelled, but his golden boy mask was gone. My dad called me, crying, saying he didn't know. I told him he chose not to know, and I hung up. I didn't need his apology anymore. Back at college, I felt lighter. I kept writing, publishing poems under a pseudonym about surviving, about reclaiming your voice. They got picked up by a small magazine, and strangers wrote to me, saying my words helped them heal. I didn't hate Jake or my dad. I pitied them. They'd built their lives on lies, and I'd torn those lies down, not with vengeance, but with truth. I graduated, got a job teaching writing, and started a blog where I shared stories of overcoming pain, never naming Jake, but always honoring the girl I used to be. Mia and my new friends became my family, the kind that sees you, not your scars. Sometimes I'd get messages from cousins, saying they were sorry, that they believed me now. I didn't need their guilt. I'd found peace, not in hurting Jake or my dad, but in proving I was more than their betrayal. My voice, the one they tried to silence, was my justice. It wasn't loud or vengeful. It was quiet, steady, and mine. 5 years after that reunion, I'm 30, sitting in my small Michigan apartment, a cup of tea cooling on the table, my laptop open to a blog post I just published about surviving family betrayal. The words flow easier now, but the memories of Jake's fists, his knuckles slamming into my cheek, the way my head snapped back, still creep in sometimes, uninvited. I can still hear my dad's voice, cold and certain, saying, "You brought this on yourself, Sarah," as I wiped blood from my face at 13. Those moments don't define me anymore, but they're part of me, like cracks in a sidewalk you learn to step over. I don't hate my dad or Jake. Hate's too heavy to carry. Instead, I've built a life that's mine, one they can't touch. My teaching job fills my days with kids who remind me of the girl I was. I tell them their stories matter, like Mrs. Ellis told me. My blog has grown, with thousands of readers now, people who write to me saying my words help them face their own pain. I don't share the worst details. No one needs to hear about the time Jake locked me in a closet for hours, laughing as I begged to be let out. I focus on the healing, on how you can rebuild after someone tries to break you. I haven't spoken to my dad in years. He sends emails sometimes, short ones, asking to meet. I don't reply, not out of anger, but because I don't need his approval anymore. I heard Jake's life unraveled after college. No job, no more football glory, just a string of bar fights and excuses. My cousins told me he blames everyone but himself. I don't feel joy at that. I wanted truth, not destruction. Exposing him at the reunion wasn't about revenge. It was about taking back my voice, the one he and my dad tried to silence. I still have my journals, tucked in a box under my bed, pages filled with every cruel thing Jake did. Every time my dad looked away, I don't read them much now, but they're there, a reminder of what I survived. My friend Mia's still in my life, always ready with a hug or a bad joke when I get quiet. Last year, I started a writing workshop for survivors, a safe place to share stories. One woman, older than me, cried as she read about her sister's betrayal. I held her hand, feeling that old ache in my chest, but also pride. I'd turned my pain into something good. Sometimes I run into people from my hometown, and they ask about the reunion, about Jake. I just say I told my truth and change the subject. My peace doesn't come from their apologies or Jake's downfall. It comes from knowing I'm not that scared girl anymore. I walk past mirrors now and see someone strong, someone who chose to rise instead of break. My dad's betrayal, Jake's brutality. They thought they could define me, but they were wrong. I defined myself. Every word I write, every kid I teach, every step I take is proof of that. I'm not perfect. Some nights I still dream of Jake's sneer, or my dad's cold eyes, and I wake up shaking. But then I get up, make tea and write. I tell my story, not to dwell on the pain, but to show what's possible after it. I've learned that justice isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's just living well, being whole, despite those who tried to tear you apart. I'm still learning, still healing, but I'm here and that's enough. I'm 32 now, standing in a community center classroom, watching a group of women scribble in notebooks during my writing workshop, their faces a mix of fear and hope. It's been almost 2 decades since Jake's fist crashed into my jaw, leaving me crumpled on our living room floor, my dad's voice cutting deeper than the pain. "You should have known better, Sarah." That memory still stings, like a bruise that never fully fades. I can still feel the weight of those years, Jake's taunts, his hands shoving me into walls, the way he'd smirk when my dad praised him. My father's betrayal was worse, though. His refusal to see my pain, his choice to lift Jake up while I drowned in silence. I don't carry that weight like I used to. Teaching these workshops, reading emails from blog readers who say my story gave them courage, it's like I'm turning those old wounds into something that helps others heal. I don't talk about the worst moments in public. The time Jake held my arm over a stove burner, laughing as I screamed, or the nights I hid in my closet, heart pounding, praying he'd leave me alone. Those stay in my journals, locked away. Not because I'm ashamed, but because my story now is about what comes after. My dad tried reaching out again last year, leaving a voicemail about wanting to make things right. I listened to it once, then deleted it. His words felt hollow. Too late. I heard Jake's living in a rundown apartment back in Ohio, working odd jobs, his charm worn thin. My cousins say he's bitter, still blaming me for his fall. I don't wish him pain. I wanted him to face the truth, and he did. That's enough. My life's different now. I've got a small house, a cat named Luna who curls up next to me while I write, and a circle of friends who feel like family. Mia's still my rock, always dragging me to try new things like pottery classes, where I'm terrible but laugh anyway. My blog's grown bigger than I ever imagined, with people sharing their own stories of betrayal and survival in the comments. I read every one, sometimes crying, sometimes smiling, knowing I'm not alone anymore. I still teach too, mostly high school kids who remind me of myself, quiet ones carrying hurts they don't talk about. I tell them to write, to let their voices out, because no one can take that away. Sometimes I'll catch a glimpse of my old self in their eyes, and it pushes me to keep going. I don't dream about Jake as much now, but when I do, it's not fear that wakes me, it's resolve. I'll get up, make coffee, and start my day, knowing I've built something he and my dad could never break. My workshops have become a safe haven, not just for others, but for me. Last week, a woman named Lisa shared a poem about her abusive brother, her voice shaking but strong. I hugged her after, feeling that old ache in my chest, but also pride. I'd helped her find her voice like Mrs. Ellis did for me all those years ago. I don't need my dad's apology or Jake's regret. My justice is in this life I've made, teaching, writing, loving people who see me for who I am. I walk through my days lighter now, not because the past is gone, but because I've learned to carry it differently. I'll never forget the way Jake's cruelty and my dad's silence tried to crush me, But I'll also never forget the moment I stood up at that reunion, my voice steady, telling the truth. That was the start of everything. I'm still healing, still learning what it means to be whole. But every time I help someone else speak, every time I write a new post or hug a student who's struggling, I'm proving I'm more than what they did to me. I'm Sarah, and my story isn't about pain. It's about what grows from it.